Well, Scott, thank you so much for setting your time aside with us. And, I am so grateful. I met you briefly in Chicago. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. You were main stage speaking on the subject of stress. But really what I resonated with me and stuck with me over all these years was that, yes, you're an expert in stress, but you gain expertise by serving people through some really, really challenging scenarios. You've been in the trenches, as they say, with individuals dealing with substance abuse, individuals who have lost a child due to murder and some really tragic, and you've sat alongside those individuals experiencing their final days on this physical earth. And so I think there's a lot of wisdom that your life and really the wisdom you've gained from being in service of others in those really monumental and transformational times can have with our audience. So I just want to thank you, Dr. Sheperd, so much for your time today in advance of this, what I know will be a fun conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it. This is great.
One of the things I thought was really interesting observing is that I think that wisdom for people come one of two ways. They come from walking our own path, or it comes from holding hands and learning from others' paths and being in those places of transformation and really pivotal moments in someone's life. You spent 25 years? Was it 25 years in counseling?
Oh, I've been, well, I'm 75 right now. So I've been doing stuff for 45, 50 years, working with people a lot. So, but yeah, I got my doctorate in 80. But so that was what, 40 years ago in counseling, and I was working in a mental health center in the late 60s. So yeah, I've been doing stuff for I tell a story about a lady who was in her 70 or in her early 70s, and I when I was 55 doing it, and now I think, heck, I'm older than she was when I'm telling this story. So yeah, I've been doing it for a long time.
So one of the things that I think we forget is how common, how similar we all are as people. That right now more than ever, there's this focus on this person or that person is different for these 1 through 5 reasons, right?
Right.
When in that 25 years of serving people, did you notice a value or a core value or values that bind all of us in similarities? Like, what did you discover that makes us the same in walking alongside those people for 40 plus years?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think when I would say people love, people love. I mean, people hate obviously and have all kinds of stuff, but there is a root. People that might hate you, but they love somebody. There's something in there, and then you can, if somehow if we can attach to that, and people want to be heard. I think that got me into the whole thing. People want to be heard, not necessarily saved or told what to do, but people want to be heard. They know that somebody's at least trying to understand what they're going through. Um, that's something that's just always struck me. Um, yeah, it's a hard thing to put exactly into words, but I think there is that sense of though, um, people want to connect. They want to. But then when we got a lot of flaws too as human beings, and people go out of their way to stay in bad places. I mean, as soon as I said people want to be heard, but I've seen so many times when people define their situation in the way that it wants to be special. Like you can't understand what I feel unless you've been through it. Well, I've never bought that. I refuse to buy that. That I can't. If you when I started working in substance abuse, the first job I had, and I already had my doctorate. I know I didn't have it yet, but I'd worked in counseling and I worked with people. And I told the people, the guy was being let go of a job who was recovering, but he just wasn't doing a very good job as a counselor. And I was sort of taking his place. And a lot of the people were mad at me because I wasn't recovering, and how the heck could I help them and the guy who was recovering was not going to keep the job. And
Yeah.
I said to them, I said, listen, if you want to not listen to anything I have to say or want to just blow me off because of that, then you're going to do that. I said, but I don't buy that I have to totally experience when people say, I know how you feel, the best thing to say is I care how you feel.
Mm.
I care what you're going through. And I would say to people, even when dealing with cancer, don't assume that because this person is going through cancer and you went through cancer that you know how they feel. They're a different person than you are. They're feeling something, but what they don't want to just be, oh, I know how you feel. And that dismisses you, as opposed to what's going on. I'm interested in you. I care about what you're feeling. And to me, when people respond, when they feel there was somebody who cares about them, who doesn't say, oh, just do this and it'll be okay and it'll be fine. Another thing I found is that people can have a sense of humor in the most dire situations. I mean, and I always had to be careful because I have a sense of humor.
Yes, you do.
A dry sense of humor. And, and I can't assume that everybody's going to, that's a big thing. Don't assume anybody's going to be, but once I got a feel for a person, I could play with them a little bit and they even against their will, they would start laughing a little bit about something, and once that started to happen, I don't know, magic would start to happen in the relationship. I mean, I would be with people who was real sick and somebody said, well, what if I die? And I wouldn't say this to everybody, but if I knew this person a little bit, I said, well, I can put your mind at ease on that one. You're gonna. And of course, they'd look at me like, what? I said, yeah, you can pretty well count. That's, maybe it might not be 40, 50 years from now, but you're going. Maybe the question is, what if I live? What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do right now? And it was like, and that first shock, and then they would start to laugh a little bit. I said, because you're not dead yet. You're still here. So this is the question. And all of a sudden, it was just switching the framework a little bit. I tell you that story?
That's it. So I gotta ask. So you sitting alongside of somebody who is experiencing a potentially terminal illness.
Yes.
Right? And they said, what if I die? And you challenge that person in that moment.
Yeah.
Okay, but what if you live? Right?
First I say, you can. That's an easy question.
Yeah,
you're gonna die.
Yeah, 100%.
That's easy.
I mean,
next question.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a choice to, Vanna. There's not a choice to.
Exactly.
And
it's like, what if you live for another? And it was, what if tomorrow I go? What if tomorrow I go? I said, eventually you're going to be right.
Yeah,
eventually, that tomorrow will be the day you go.
Yeah, you can't charge fortune. You can't charge somebody for telling a fortune on that one.
That's right. And I say, you're missing the time you have. Right now you could be loving somebody, hugging somebody, doing something or other, and you're spending time worrying about something that's going to happen anyways. I say, but it's your choice. But I just wanted to break people out of a pattern of what they were doing.
Did you find that similar between individuals who are experiencing addiction, individuals who are in a terminal place? I mean, I think there's two terminals. You tell me. I think there's being mentally terminal, which means that your body's fine, but your brain's dead, right? And there's individuals who are physically terminal, right?
Yeah.
Did you find that there's a pattern of behavior of just being in a, like, I've chosen this path, but I don't realize I've chosen this path? Like, how big of a impact did interrupting that pattern have in those counseling sessions?
I think it's everything, interrupting the pattern. No matter what, it wasn't about judging them. Like most of them, especially for addiction, they made some choices that didn't work out. And now they're caught. And addiction is really bad thing. It's hard. It's hard to break out of. And and it was like, it wasn't about judging them, but it was like breaking the pattern and letting them know, that they could do it and that there were people. That's why I was always a big fan of AA, because when you went into these meetings, and a lot of people go to AA and they relapse all the time, but a lot of people, they started seeing other people. You got to see somebody who broke the pattern, and you say, it can be done.
Yes.
Maybe can't even believe I can do it right now, but he did it. And, if he did it, then maybe I can do it. And it's like, and then if you relapse, you say, okay, I screwed up, but let's, that's going to be part of it. And it's just, I keep believing in them. And most counseling times I was very empathic. But when I did addiction counseling, I was a mean SOB sometimes. I would tell people would say, I'd say, did you get to your meeting at AA? I was doing aftercare. So they were done with the inpatient treatment and they would start to go, well, I couldn't get there. I say, just shut up. Don't even talk to him. I don't want to hear it. No, really. Because no. No, you got every reason in the world to not go, and it's like, it'd be like you have cancer and you could go get this treatment that would help you. See, no, I was busy. I had a flat tire. I couldn't get there. That doesn't make any sense. They would get so mad at me sometimes, but it was like, fight for yourself, fight for yourself. But then you got to work with people that they believe in themselves, that they're worth fighting for. Because when people get down on themselves, I'm a loser, I'm no good, I've wasted my whole life, I just threw it away. It's, boy, those are hard to break. That's hard to break.
Yeah,
And it's,
it's I couldn't even imagine like my we I just lost my oldest sister on at the end of December due to just the complications of a lifelong of addiction to pretty much everything a person can
yeah,
consume, right?
yeah.
And she was in and out of multiple treatment centers, and my family spent an enormous amount of money trying to
Yeah.
save her,
Oh, yeah,
trying to save
yeah.
her, right? And but at the end of the day, she had to save herself, right? And that's what I hear you saying is that there's this commonality, right? And this is one of the things I think people so misunderstand about the human condition, and my observation of having the honor of interviewing so many people is that there are like one love is universal. We all love something or someone, and
Yeah.
in Viktor Frankl's work, Man in Search of Meaning, he ties into that in terms of how much the love of something can save you in the harshest and most
Yes.
horrific conditions,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
Great book. Yes.
it's an incredible book. I tell people it's not a bedtime read. It's not a
No.
bedtime read.
No.
But it's a eye-opening read to understand the power that humans exist, that what we can as a humans endure and come out, with most of our faculties entailed. What I'm really curious about is how often did you have any situations where you're watching somebody and you're going, oh man, like that is like that's gonna be a tough one, and watch kind of like, you familiar with the story of the phoenix, the bird that
Uh-huh.
all right,
Rising from the ashes.
rising from the ashes, right? Like how often did you see people where you went, okay, and you just
Oh,
sat back and
oh, in
just
substance abuse, I was wrong a bunch of times. People would go through our program, and I would think, this guy will be screwed up before he gets down to the bottom floor of this building, and then he wouldn't be. He was somewhere between where I was seeing him and the bottom of the building. Somewhere he found something, or she found something. So, there were times that I would work with people, and they would surprise me. They came out of the ashes, and so I never sold anybody short, though. I mean, even though I didn't think this person, probably because I didn't think they worked hard or whatever, but I always believed they could do it. I believe they could do it. And I keep trying to sell that. And enough of those surprises like that happened to me when I would see somebody. We had one guy. Oh, this guy was a mess. He was violent, and I was one of the few people to confront him in treatment, and it was just a mess. And anyways, and he was sort of basically threatening me that don't be surprised, that he would rip my face off if he saw me on the street. And I
that
thought,
would
oh
I
boy.
heard you.
Oh, and he had already kicked the side of a cop car, of a door in. I mean, so this guy had, tendency. Honest to God, when he came in to a meeting, I was happened to be at the front desk, and he came up to the desk, and he actually was kidding me. He says, "Well, I'm here to rip your face off," but he was just joking about it. I mean, so now, unfortunately, he eventually relapsed down the road a while and died,
Oh,
from it. But he had a stretch. He had a stretch where, it's I don't know. I was amazed all the time. I was amazed with people with can you imagine having your child murdered? I mean, and then people, they come back, and they're just are down, and they're a mess, and they just reach down in there. And again, sometimes it's religion, sometimes it's whatever, it's different things sometimes, but they reach down and they refuse to be beaten. They just I always tell people I'm a big believer in the power of the human spirit, and I also believe we're dumb. We're really dumb, and we do dumb things all the time. And yet, despite that, we can reach down and change direction. We can make something else happen. And I always wanted to be around that. I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to, I think I was helping people, but I was being helped by them at the same time. I was being inspired by them.
So talk to me about that. So you watch people that's why I wanted to me your career is the equivalent of that courtside announcer, right?
Yeah,
Who's
yeah.
who's watching and watching comeback after comeback after comeback. Like the team's down, 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. They're down
Right.
20 points in the
Yeah.
whatever it may be, and you're going, "Oh man, this game's over." And they're right, and you're going, "No, wait a minute, wait a minute." You forget who they got on their team, the human spirit, right? You forget who's on their team, right? Is
The
there?
only difference in that analogy is that I'm also not just announcing it, I'm involved in the game with them.
Yeah, you're.
And so I'm occasionally throwing out an idea here or there that might help them if they've gotten a little bit out of, if they've started to get down on themselves, if they start thinking there's no way I can do this, there's no way, and I'm throwing out something to think, well, not saving them, not saying just do this, but just say challenge your thinking a little bit, look at it maybe from this way or whatever it would be, and that sometimes gives them that little step up, that one next step, and then they take it from there, and then they start running with it again, and they start believing. And it's amazing. I did a thing one time with a guy. It was in substance abuse. He was getting ready to be discharged, and we were doing a role play. And I was talking to him, and I said he was sort of cocky. He was going to not have any problem. And I became a bottle of beer, and I said to him, "Hey, do you remember when you were down before? Who was always there for you? Come on, who was there for you? It was me, wasn't it? You remember you could come in and sit down and get a cold one of me, and I could be right there and make it better for you. Remember that? Remember that?" And I said, come on over here. Come on, let's be friends again. And he started walking toward me, and he was going out the next day, and he goes, "Oh my God." I said, yeah, this is tough. Do not get cocky. Cocky will kill you, but they do. But think about it. You got a good friend, but think about it. The bottle of beer is your friend, or that drink. That whole gestalt with that is that you sit down with them and you have that beer. When I would work with people and they would be so mad at their husband or wife for being screwed up, and we had family week, and I knew most of them. This was back in the 70s. I say, most of you are smoking. Right. I say, let's go through that. You get that little pack of cigarettes, right? And then and I would do the whole thing, taking off the top, patting the cigarette on your hand, flicking the end of it, running it through the lighter, and I said, this is all called foreplay. This is just getting ready for it. And then you take that match, and there's certain ways of lighting the cigarette. Maybe you do it Clint Eastwood style, or maybe you're like a little spy, and then and then I would go pretend like you take that first drag, and half the people in the audience would be going, "Oh God, I want a cigarette so bad." I said, that is part of it. It's not just quit drinking. It was never just, what is it? Just say no.
Yeah.
Once you're in it, just saying no ain't going to get it. You got to deal with some stuff. You got to deal with some stuff.
You
and
do.
Big time. You got it. And it's one thing for me to say it, but you got to do it. And they do it sometimes. 25, 27 years, 30 years sobriety. 30, amazing.
I do not think we celebrate individuals who have found sobriety enough in this country.
No.
Not even close. Because here's the truth. Like, if you are sober, clean and sober, no alcohol, no tobacco, right? And you truly live that way, that means everything that's coming your way, there is no place to escape. You're eating it, right? You're having there is no easy, like, I'm gonna escape from this process. You have to sit in whatever is coming your way, good or bad. And I personally made the choice 3 years ago to quit drinking entirely. I haven't drank in 3 years. I didn't have an addiction issue. I didn't go through substance abuse. But here's why, right? Is because I read some of Dr. Brene Brown's work, and I read all of her works. And she made a comment in one of her books that profoundly shaped my perspective on the consumption of mind-altering substances, which alcohol is one of them. Which was, you cannot selectively numb emotion, right? You can't, when you take something like alcohol, it numbs all of your emotions. And at that time I had 2, now I have 3 beautiful young children, and I don't want to turn down the emotion of love in my relationships with the people I care about. If this is muting my ability to feel love and experience love all in, right, then I don't want any part of it, right?
Yeah,
So,
no, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
and there's a
And
lot of other.
I always called alcohol too the promise that never quite delivers. You know, a lot of times you have that first drink and you think, oh yeah, I'm relaxed a little bit, feels sort of good. I'll have another one. But the first one was as good as it's going to get, and after that, you're to keep looking for that, and it just goes away and away and away and
Yes,
away.
yes, yeah. That's
Yeah,
that's that's
yeah, but
my.
I don't get into telling people don't drink or anything. It's like you got to just look at your own life, and you have to. That's the hard thing. There's another thing is we have trouble being honest with ourselves. Sometimes we can kid ourselves. Oh, it's not that bad. It's okay. I'm doing all right, and we can tell ourselves a story that is not an honest story and keep it going. And it's hard. It's hard to do it, you know. But when I used to teach counseling too, though, with the death and dying stuff, I would say counselors sometimes have a God complex that they're going to save people. And I say, and you have to be very careful. If you're doing a session and it's always 50 minutes, but you're always going an hour, you know, and I don't mean once in a great while, but I mean, because if I just had 10 more minutes, I could save this person. You're
Mm,
constantly going over. You got to look at yourself. I said, but with death and dying, when somebody has died, you're not going to fix that. Well, it'll be okay next week. I'm bringing them back. No, you're not bringing them back. They're not going to come back, not on planet Earth walking around. So it's like, know what your limitation is. Sort of one of the Clint Eastwood lines. A man needs to know his limitations. Well, a helper needs to know that you can't make everything better. You got to help people believe in themselves. And people used to ask me, wasn't it depressing working in that? I said, no, it was sad. Sometimes it was very sad, but what depressing was what's working in my regular counseling, and people, they didn't want to do. I would always give homework as a therapist. Before you come in next time, nothing big, just do this. And when they would come in the next week, I say, did you do that? No. Okay. And next week, no. About the fourth week, I wanted to say, oh, just shut up, which is not a real good counselor response. But that would, they just, instead of just bitching at the lunch table, which I wrote a whole song about whining our lunch away, they had a little money or somehow, and so they were paying me to listen to them, but they didn't want to work on anything. Now that's sort of depressing. But when somebody's dealing with death and dying and the big stuff, boy, then you reach down and then you make it happen. I still get excited even just thinking about some of the people I worked with that were amazing situations. Amazing.
so did you say a thematic? Like this is because one I think's really incredible is so you worked with parents whose children have been murdered. You work with individuals who experience term
Terminal illnesses, yeah.
terminal illnesses, and you worked with you know individuals recovering and going through the recovery process for so those I mean I that's the big leagues like
Yeah.
that is like each one of those on its own, but like to do like that's like the Iron Man of that's like it's I mean truthfully like each one of those areas on its own, and you watched people other than obviously like so I want to talk about terminal illness on its own because I think that's kind of like you aren't as you said like if you have terminal cancer, like truly terminal cancer, like that's a whole different experience. But was there a thematic or something common for those who rose from the ashes? Because our whole podcast is about living with intentionality, of being on purpose with how you live and how you show up and what you model into this world for yourself, for the people you love, and those you lead. And what's really interesting is I know some people that may be listening to this going, well, that's all great for you, Kyle, right? And you must be in this wonderful, privileged place or what have you. But for me, I'm just trying to make it, right? Well,
Yeah.
I suspect a lot of these people that you served and walked through these really challenging times felt that way. They're like, hey, that's all great for you, Scott, but you get to go home and, or what have you. And you probably heard that. Was there a thematic?
I said it to them. And I just didn't hear it. I would say it to them. I would say, you're sitting there right now, and I'm saying this, and and I'm going to go home and have dinner with my wife. You're still dealing with cancer or whatever it would be. I said, so this is hard. This is really, really hard. The whole thing was that it can be done. But you know what? It doesn't matter. You're right. But it's like I just wanted to keep pushing that, but it's not just enough to say that. It was like, but even if they say, well, okay, well, how do I do it though? Even if I want to believe, I don't know. I made my whole life has been making one mistake after another one. How am I going to quit doing that? And then we start looking at it. We start discussing it. We start playing with the different options that were going on. But it was like, as the little thing of hope would be in there. But you're absolutely right. I would say that in my talks on stress, easier said than done. People would say that to me. I said, duh, everything's easier said than done, So it's like, yeah, it's a bitch. Doing it is hard. It's hard, but it's like, what was the common thing though? Somewhere, first of all, they had to think, I have something to offer. Or they cared about somebody so much, maybe a child or a spouse or a friend, or I don't know, something. They reached in that they were, and sometimes I never did know what it, but all of a sudden they found something, maybe just whatever it was. But when all of a sudden it started to happen, and you go, wow, you don't know how many times I just did wow in seeing somebody that I remember what they were like 4 weeks earlier and what they were doing now, and getting involved in the thing. And I told the story when I was on a TV show, a Penn and Teller show.
Yes.
And the guy saw it, and he said he was just getting ready to watch this show. I won't say the name of the show because it's a little crude, but that was the actual name of the show. It was called like BS, but spelled out. But he said, is that the Scott Sheperd that helped me get sober 27 years ago?
Mm.
He was sober. Now, I wouldn't have remembered him from a bale of hay at this point in time, but he remembered, but he did the work, but it was like, I want to see people. I'd love this, not for, oh, look at me, I helped him. No, I don't know, that all passes. But to be around people that do it, it helps me when I start to doubt myself. When I start to do it, I say, and it's like, and to say, I can remember Joe Smith or, Mary, whatever. And look what they did. Look what they did.
Yeah, it's a crazy to hear you talk. Like, this is part of the reason is like the passion's never left you. The passion of serving another person in this.
Yes, I love it more than about anything.
Yeah. You can tell. I mean, my goodness, you can tell. And I think what's so crazy, like, is that so often, like, people wonder, like, how did that person get, like, you're going, I don't think that, like, that's over, like that, and then they do it, they come back, right? And one of the powerful things is, for me, is that I fundamentally believe that. It's 65 years old, it's 75 years old. I do not believe that there is a shot clock on your life. You can change it 5 minutes before it's over, right? Yes. I believe that the power is there, that forgiveness can happen, that love can happen, that a whole lifetime of a hot mess can make a difference. There's this, it's kind of a humorous, I forget which, it's one of the organizations that promote people to donate their organs. I forget which one it is. And they have this ad of this guy, he's driving a beat up pickup truck. He's letting his dog poop on the sidewalk. He's, pulling people's laundry out of the, but just the guy's a total jerk. The guy's, I mean, just all these videos of this guy being a jerk. And then they show him, like, he's drinking and driving, I think, and dies and hits a tree. Forget exactly how the guy loses his life. And the ambulance shows up and it pulls out the card, and he's an organ donor. And it's like, in life, this guy was a jerk, but in death, he was a saint. He was great, right? Yeah. If that doesn't define, like, the idea that we could all, like, we all have the ability to course correct, right? And that is the big. You have the ability.
People don't, though. I mean, the sad part, though, is a lot of people don't. And if they've lived a life being angry and bitter, a lot of them go to the grave angry and bitter. But not everybody. That's what you're saying. Some people stop and they say, I might have wasted 75 years of my life, but I might have 25 minutes left, and I'm not going to waste it.
Not going to waste them.
Yeah, but a lot of people do. It is amazing to me too that people do that. But you know how it does? It's like the whole thing of passing it on. When I tell this story of when I did a talk about to a group called Parents of Murdered Children, and one guy, and they were giving me a lot of grief about, well, you don't know, Sheperd, you don't have a child that was murdered, blah blah blah. And one guy stood up and he agreed with me because I talked about the concept of forgiveness. And
Mm.
I think that's an interesting concept because I think we've screwed that concept up. We sort of think forgiveness is me telling you, oh, it's okay. You step on my foot and you say, oh, I'm sorry. And I say, I don't, it's all right. Don't worry about it. It's like, it's okay. Well, if you murdered my child, that is never going to come out of my mouth. It's okay. You murdered my child. That ain't going to happen.
No.
Forgiveness is not about somehow giving absolution to a person. It's about saying, I am not going to carry anymore this hatred and anger because now you've not only killed my child, you have killed me and every relationship I have with other children and people. And I said that, and I knew this, and I knew this group would turn on me. I knew they would. I had met some of them, and they had not worked through anything yet, and they did. They were called. I mean, and I always kid in my talks. They were like, "Sheperd, you're an idiot." I said they weren't just thinking that; they were telling me, "Sheperd, you're an idiot," in the room. And then one guy stood up. One guy stood up. Big guy, truck driver. And I'd seen him, honest to God, I'd seen him when he walked in the room before the talk, and I thought, oh boy, if he gets mad at me, this could be my teeth. But he stood up and he said, no, I agree with Sheperd. He said, my daughter was murdered 12 years ago. He said, and for 10 years, I got up every morning and I hated. He said, it finally dawned on me that first, this isn't bringing my daughter back. But secondly, and this was even the big one, is that she deserved better than that for me. She didn't live her whole life so that I could hate somebody else. Now, it took him 10 years to get there, but he said there was choice. I'm always talking about choices. Power is about choices. If you don't see the choices, you don't see the power. I said, what would have been his first choice? That his daughter would walk through the door and she wasn't murdered. He didn't have that choice anymore. That choice was gone. But just because you don't have the choice you want doesn't mean you don't have any choices at all. And it took him 10 years to get there, but he was finally saying, and then I told that story about after that happened, about 2 weeks later, I was talking to another bereavement group, but it was not murder, just people who had lost loved ones. And I talked about this guy a little bit and the choice he made. A few months after that, I get a letter from this woman. She said, I was at such and such a church and you spoke there. It was right around Christmas. Now it was spring. She said, I just wanted to thank you. She said, I had an adult daughter who had died in a car crash about 2 years ago, and I wasn't there, but I had heard that she had been caught in a car and it caught on fire and she wasn't able to get out. And she said, and so for 2 years, all she could picture in her head was her daughter. She said, and after hearing this other story, though, she said, my daughter deserved better than that. This was a woman who loved and who laughed and brought so much vitality. And for me to take her life and condense it into the last 45 seconds and sum up her life that way was unfair to her. And she was thanking me. And honest to God, I was reading her note and I was looking up and saying, wherever this truck driver was, I said, thank you. Because him doing that gave that story to me that I passed on to her and helped her deal with the loss of her daughter. And to not just focus on those last 45 seconds, but to focus on her life. That's a choice that mother had to make. And now some people say, I can't, I just can't. Well, I would say, I don't agree with you. I mean, you're not making it, but you can make that choice. And she did it. And I mean, that's just unbelievable.
That's the kind of, like, we're celebrating the Super Bowl wins and
oh,
these folks. To me, like, that's the stuff. That's the
yeah.
real stuff. Those are the real heroes in this world. And,
yeah.
I think I shared with you on the pre-call that my grandfather was murdered when I was a couple years old.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so in 5th grade, I sat in the trial, like sat through one of the trials of one of the men that was responsible for my grandfather's murder. And, this is my mother's father, extraordinarily emotional. My aunts and uncles, my older cousins are there as well. This is like, everyone we know is there, like, so it's not like, my mother had another childcare option that was super easy, right? Because her whole family's involved in this. My father's an only child. So the truth, so I'm sitting there and I'm watching my mother and rightfully so. Like, this is not just out of observation. She was so angry that week as she's rehearing what like, the testimony and the defense and all this junk and jazz. And I sit back and I think about something that's so true for me in my life. And it resonates so deeply, right? Is that there was a period of time when I was in 8th grade when I sat and I prayed for the forgiveness of the people who killed my grandfather. But what happened, and what I rarely share, but you brought up a point that I hope resonates with others that are hearing what you're saying, is that then in college, I did this, I've done this many times over my life, is one of the gentlemen who was keenly responsible for my grandfather's murder was coming up for parole. And I wrote a letter to the parole board, and I've written multiple letters to the parole board, as victim families get to do,
Mhm, mhm.
right? Suggesting this individual not get out, right? Because I still believe he was responsible and should be held responsible for his decisions. And this is a key difference, right? I had already forgave him, right?
Mhm.
But I still expected there, like, his,
Oh yeah,
right? There's a
for
delta between
sure.
forgiveness, like,
Oh
I'm not going
yeah.
around hating you, but you're still going to be responsible for the decision you made. And there are consequences to decisions. And this is, I could not agree with you more. There are two words that we have, three words, right, according to you, two words that I see getting just bastardized to the end of the earth, which is love, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
forgiveness.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned stress, which we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah.
But like we like forgiveness is an inside job. It's an inside job, right?
Oh yeah, I don't forgive you for you. I forgive you for me. I don't want to walk around with that hate and anger anymore. You know, I'm not doing that for your sake. I'm doing it for me. I don't want to be burdened down with that. I'm just not going to do that. But I still might hold you accountable. And yeah, like you said, you know, whatever it would be. Now, on the other hand, if somebody came up, I mean, and it's different, but basically that's it. That's it. I'm not going to let my life be totally consumed with hatred and anger and bitterness, and I'm not going to do that. So, so that's what that term though is. Like you said, that's a word. There should be another word. I don't even know how we would do it because
I
that
agree.
word
I
is
couldn't agree more.
so entrenched now. I don't.
No, it's
I've given up.
no, it's to me, it's to me, hate, right? The
Yeah,
opposite of it.
yeah,
Hate's like walking around with the poison you made for your enemy and drinking it
yeah. Oh
yourself.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Totally,
You know,
totally.
do
And
you?
hoping that it'll kill them,
Yeah,
but I'm
hoping it'll kill
drinking the
them.
poison.
Yeah, it's like, here, this'll show ya.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
don't do
Yeah,
that again. Well,
yeah.
do you see? Like, here's what's interesting to me, right? And guide me here. Guide me here. Is that I would think, right? I would think the commonality of, um, specifically the two trenches of addiction and recovery, and the trench of parents who have lost a child to murder. The commonality, the thematic would certainly be one of them would be forgiveness, and that there has to be, if you're dealing with addiction, traditionally from my friends and individuals who work through that, it's either forgiving yourself for a mistake that you feel is unforgivable, or forgiving somebody else for a mistake you have felt is unforgivable. And then obviously, if your child's been murdered, there's some level of forgiveness to move beyond that. Like, do you see people who are in these really pivotal moments? Like, how important is forgiveness to move beyond that? Is that if we're baking a cake, like, is that a required ingredient to move beyond, to have
Yeah,
that
and
Phoenix moment?
I think there's something that even precedes forgiveness is the sense of power that they carry.
Mm,
You know, I always talk about power. It's about that. Is that I am not helpless. I have more power than I think I do. I can't change events, you know, but and it goes back to Frankel again. You know, between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is where we make our choices, and that is about our own power in our own lives. And when people say, I can't help it, I can't help it," then they're putting themselves in that place of being helpless. It isn't that way, but that's the way they're defining it. And as long as they do that, I always say, if you want to be miserable, you win. You will always win the misery game. You can always come up with one more yeah, but then I can come up with a suggestion. And I always kid people. I say, I got so tired of that. A lot of times I would say people, well, when my talk's over, see me before I leave. I might have a couple suggestions for you in case you ever find yourself happy against your will, that I can help you make. You know, I mean, it's like, but it's you got to see that I can do this, or at least it's possible. Maybe right now I'm having trouble seeing how to do it, but I have to believe it's possible. And that's what that truck driver did for that woman. You know, I'm sure she was stuck with, I can't help but see my daughter in that car. I mean, that's a hard image to get away
super hard
from.
image, yes.
Hard. And yet to see that this guy, 10 years it took him, but he did something, and somehow that helped her. I'm sure she was still struggling with it, but she
No
was at
question.
least seeing another walkway, another way that started to move in another direction. And once you're on that walkway, it starts to change. The scenery is a little different, and you just start to see moments of it. You might go back. It's just like, now that's a common thing. You might relapse. She might go back and start picturing her daughter in that car. You might go back and start drinking again, but you don't stay there as long. You say, oh no, I don't want to be here anymore. And you got to go back to this other one. You've seen it. And, but I tell people that when I do my talk, when I say, I'm not standing up here like I've got this all together. And if you all work at it real hard, you could be just like me. I say more than once my wife has handed me that book and said, you want to do what your book says, big shot?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, we're all human beings. We're going to have our own stuff. And it's not about being perfect. It's about getting up. It's about, it's about not going to the bad places as often, not staying there as long, believing in the possibilities of doing it. I mean, yeah, I loved it. I love being in it, But the one story I got to just tell you.
Yeah, please.
I tell the story all the time, and I was telling it to Kara when I was talking to her. I think I might have told it to you, but when a young woman I worked with I was in the hospital. I was working in substance abuse, but I was now starting to work with people coming into the hospital for cancer and all this other stuff. And they asked me to talk to this young woman who had her prognosis was really bad. But at the moment, she didn't look that bad. I mean, she was having some issues, but if you just looked at her, you wouldn't think, oh, she's going to die very shortly or within a year or so. But she was probably going to. And I went in to talk to her, and I saw some visitors and just talked to her. And as we talked, I started to think she's thinking about killing herself. I mean, that was playing around. Now she didn't have a gun under her hospital bed or anything, so it wasn't like it was going to happen. But so I said to her, sounds to me like you're thinking about killing yourself. And she said, well, why not? While I can still do it and save myself a lot of misery.
Wow.
What I did not say, because I've always hated this line where you say to somebody, oh, you don't want to do that. Because I say, that's always like the kid who says, I think I want an ice cream cone. And mom says, yo, you don't want that. And the kid's going, I'm pretty sure I do. I might not get an ice cream cone, but I'm pretty sure I want an ice cream cone.
Yeah.
So I didn't say, oh, you don't want to do that. In fact, I said, no, I get it. But, you got a little time. Maybe we could just talk a little bit. Just, what the heck? And I'm like, yeah, all right, fine. And as we started talking, and she was doing, my life has been a mess. I've wasted it. I had a baby out of wedlock. Bam, bam, bam. I don't have any friends. And I said, well, no, wait. I don't know you that well, but I've noticed you've got a few friends showing up. And then this is where my humor come in. I would say, now, are they just like stupid or something? They just sort of hang out with you because they got nothing better to do or what? It seems to me they sort of like you, but I could be wrong. And she would go, well, yeah, I got a few friends. And I said, and your mom and your stepdad, man, they're here. Like they're here. I've been hearing from the nurses. They got your back. Well, yeah, okay. Just, it's not like I got nobody. Okay, you got a few people here. And then we just started talking. I said, listen, I got this movie I want you to see Monday. This was a Friday. I'll just never forget it. It's a movie about cancer. And I love this movie because there was a line in it that I always talk about where the guy who found out he had cancer, he said, I had to go from making a living to the art of living. And I've always loved that line. I said, what is making a living? Everybody's got to make a living, pay your bills, raise your kids. That's good. That's noble. But the art of living is the relationships. It's the love. It's the stuff. And so anyways, so I was getting Monday morning, I get in early and this is back in the day. Okay. So I got a projector and I'm threading a projector and I get a call from her and she's like, you coming? And I thought 2 or 3 days ago, she was like, thinking about killing herself, and now she's on my rear end to hurry up and get over
what's taking you so long?
So I'm going, hang on a minute, I'll be right over. So I get over there, and she's in a wheelchair, and she's in her clothes, not in her hospital stuff. Now, this wasn't for me. This was for her. She was now making a statement. It almost makes me tear up thinking about it. I'm back in the land of the living. I'm wearing my clothes. So I wheeled her over. We saw the movie. We started to talk. I kept, I would visit her a lot. She started to go downhill. And finally, one day I was getting near the end And I could tell she was sort of out of it, but a little bit there. And I made sure I was in her line of sight when she was sort of staring. And I said, I'm still here with you. And she said, well, of course you are. You're my friend. Of course you are. You're my friend. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's that one has always gotten me. Always gotten me. Just yeah, because and that's to me the ultimate. We didn't hang out together. And I'll tell you the final end of that story though. After we had started talking at one point about camping out, and I said I'm horrible. I was in the Cub Scouts for like 6 weeks and lost everything. I went on a camping trip. I said, oh my God, I'm just like a klutz, and she loved it. After she died, about a week later, I come into my desk at work, and there's a book on there. She had made sure it would be sent to me. It was on camping. On how to be a good camper and stuff. But yeah, I can't short of my own relationships with my own kids and my wife. I mean, those are incredible moments of just dipping into somebody's life, being with them, walking the trail with them a little bit, giving them something, getting something back from them. What do you do?
So what did you learn the most? Like in serving people at that end stage of life, what piece of wisdom did they give you that if all of us, like, I one of my favorite moments in one of your speeches is that you see more dead people inside of companies than than you. So what do you, like, what piece of wisdom from those who are at the end of life do you think that would be impactful for those who are still living?
One of the big pieces is I got from a friend of mine who I worked with, who I tell her story a lot, and she got sick just a little bit before I met her. She had a 3-year-old child. She was 7 months pregnant with twins, and then they discovered she had lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And this was back in the 70s.
Yeah, this is not good.
Her prognosis was not good.
Not good.
And plus she's 7 months pregnant, so they couldn't even do anything.
Yeah,
so they waited until the babies came out. Then they went in and they did surgery, they did chemo, they did radiation, the whole thing. And now she's got a second fatal disease going on, called dermatomyositis on top of the lymphoma. So now she's a mess. She feels like a mess. She looks like a mess, and she's a mess. And and the doctors say to her, "We're probably looking at 6 months. Okay, it's like get your stuff together." And then she asked this question to herself: how do I make today a good day? Most of us don't ask that question. We don't ask that question anyway. We ask, well, what will it take for me to have a good day? What could happen that would make it? What do I have to do? And I say, she didn't have a lot of choices. I mean, the best part of her day was sleeping. Waking up was where it went south. And yet somewhere, she made choices. Power is about choices. When she walked about 4 or 5 steps, and that was it. Wiped her out, back to bed, she could have said, she said, well, I couldn't do that 2 weeks ago. Maybe a few months later, she was walking across the room, but that was it. Wiped her out. She said, well, I couldn't do that 2 weeks ago, but every once in a while she'd have a day. She wasn't even walking as good as she was 2 weeks ago. Maybe 2 weeks ago, she was walking across the room. Today, she's going across half the room, but she said, well, I didn't have a real good day physically, but I got through it. That shows good inner strength. So this was a woman fighting for herself because she thought she was worth the effort. And as it turns out, she beat them both. And she's still alive today.
No way.
Oh, yeah. And she and I are friends. We work together a lot. And this goes to the one I said right at the beginning of our talk about one of your questions, because you talked, one of the questions you had thrown out as a possibility is the concept of dying. This is one of the biggest, and I learned it from her. We wrote a couple books together. And one of them, she said, I don't use the word dying. Here's the way this goes. You're living or you're dead. Now you might be sick, but you're going to die. So in one sense, we're all dying, cells are getting older and for all we know, we got something really bad inside of us. We don't even know about that because, tomorrow we'll start being, I got a little pain in my side. And then we find out it's something real bad, but it's been there for maybe a year. We just didn't know it. Yes. But her point was you're living. And I would do this with the people I work with too. Someday you won't be living. And then who knows? Okay, maybe, I don't know. What you believe is what you believe. But you won't be here on planet Earth. But right now you are. Now you're sick, okay, or you're disabled for some reason, but you're still alive. So it was like, don't get into the dying concept. Get into you're alive or you won't be. But right now you are. So what do you do with whatever limitations you have? What do you do? How do you take advantage of it? How do you really stay alive? And it's like you said, don't become, the way I do it now in my talks is I say, what's one of the most popular movie genres out there? Zombie movies, The Walking Dead. I say, but why are they so popular? Well, probably because it's like a whole movie for a lot of us, because we're walking around dead. We don't look as bad as zombies in the movies do, maybe, but we're dead. It's like, but you don't, you're not. Don't go.
How would you define the difference? So define the difference. Like, what makes, in your opinion, in your observation, what makes somebody in the zombie category? And we're not going to call anyone out specifically.
No, I know.
But what makes somebody, or if you want to go the positive, which may be even more impactful, like, what makes somebody alive? Like, what is that difference? What is that ingredient that says this person's living, this person's like The Walking, which I'm not a zombie guy, but I know what you're talking about. Like The Walking Dead, I think is yeah. What creates that difference for somebody?
Well, for me, because I talk about the difference between routines and ruts. We all have routines in our lives. There's nothing wrong with routines, but routines turn into ruts. And the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth. And so what happens is that we start not paying attention anymore. We don't start feeling much anymore. We don't have any ups or downs even. It's just sort of there. And it's like, but we don't really see. There's no appreciation. There's no like, oh, did you just smell that? No, we don't have that anymore. Oh, did you hear that? Oh, look at that beautiful tree. You don't have that anymore. It's like it's just sort of a gray mist, everything. The people who are alive, they see, they experience. I wrote a song called Senses, that your senses get involved. You're smelling, you're tasting, you're feeling. You have a sense of hope. You get excited. You might be hurt. You might get down at times, but you're alive, and it's like, and you take it in. It's like, Kubler-Ross talked about it, even with the death and dying, that, would you have given up when somebody you love dies? And now you're feeling a lot of pain. Would you have rather that person never been born so you would have avoided this pain? Most of us would say no. So feeling pain is not always, you don't want to dwell in it. You don't want to revel in it. You don't want to take baths in it, but it's like, that's part of the deal. And it's like, so you're aware. Zombies aren't aware of anything. I always talk about, right in my talk, awareness is everything. Gurdjieff was a philosopher, said you can't get out of prison if you don't know you're in it. And we're just not aware. We just sort of stay. And tomorrow is like yesterday, and it's like the day before. But I'll blame you for it. What's your fault? As opposed to I'm not the tail on the end of the dog. And I talk about one of the things my wife has really pushed me to keep. I talk about this a lot about skipping, is that I say, what's one thing that kids do that we never do as adults? They skip. Yes. I say, why do kids skip? And people say, it's fun. I say, yeah, but it's also a rhythm to skipping. There's a sense of being alive. There's a sense of that whole thing. Yes. And I say, and one of the things we can do is start skipping with our minds, like jumping to possibilities as opposed to, see, what if I did this? What if I did that? I've been learning with the computer. We were talking about just getting going. I'm not sure. But one of the things finally that helped me, like even with this stuff, is to start thinking like a kid. Well, what if I tried this? Oh, look at that. Look at that. It's not usually it's going to explode in my face and burn the house down because I hit a button on my keyboard, but it's like that mindset. Somebody who's alive is vital. It's vital. They have, in the 60s, the word we used a lot that you don't hear much anymore is vibes, picking up the good vibes and stuff. I always tell people I'm a 60s guy. I went through this and I like, and I say, if you don't think vibes are real, you're nuts. I say, have you ever gone to somebody's house who's just had a big argument before you got there?
You can feel it. You can feel it.
You walk in and you go, it's cold in here.
Yeah, it's 80 degrees, but it's chilly.
Yeah, it's chilly. Yeah, I say, and then yet when there's other people you're around, you think, I love being around this person. And if somebody says, why? You go, I'm not even sure, but I like this. There's something about
this person.
There's something about them.
You tell me why. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Fun. Yeah, they're fun. They stimulate me. They challenge me. I worked with a guy that sometimes when I worked in substance abuse, sometimes he was, you could go, oh my God, he's gonna, but he did other things that were so great. I tell the story one time. I saw him at the elevator. It was the end of the day. I was at the front desk, and the elevator. This was about a 5-story building, and it was just different offices and stuff. And the elevator came, and there were like 2 people on it. And he said, "No, it's okay. I'll wait." I mean, I thought, "What? It's not crowded or anything." He waited until there was nobody on the elevator, and he stood there and he just did this. He wiped his arms, he brushed himself off, and the elevator closed. And then he walked around and went down the steps to go out. And I saw him do it a couple of times. I said, "What the hell are you doing? What is that all about?" He said, "I'm not taking this stuff home with me. I'm brushing it off and I'm getting it out of here." And I always kidded him. I said, "Well, I feel," we were on the 4th floor. I said, "I feel bad for anybody who got on the elevator in the 3rd floor. What is this elevator feels so gunky?" But it was like, I love being around people like that. You go, that's a good way to think. That's an interesting way to think.
It's a good rhythm too.
Exactly.
Like,
it's
that's
not just thinking.
I took the family to South Haven, Michigan over the weekend. I grew up ice skating. It's one of my favorite things. It makes me feel like a kid. There's 2 things you want to make me. 3 things that makes me feel like a kid. Sledding, ice skating, and slip and slides. Like, you want to get me laughing, like, right? I'm being real, right? So we happened to rent a house. We were super lucky. There's this like road. It was a road that led to the lake, and it flattened out, and there's plenty of space, but a good chunk of it was a serious grade. I mean, a really serious grade. And so I'm in full snow gear, and I've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. The 2-year-old was really not about sledding yet, but I had my kid, so I'm on my stomach and the kids are on my back, right? And we're going down the hill, right? And we're often tumbling, and we're cold, but we're having fun. And then we got to trudge back up this hill, and I had my wife get on. I said, I'll hold our youngest, our 2-year-old, and I was like, get on the sled. And she gets on the sled, and she's flying, and she tumbles, and she's just cracking up. She's absolutely cracking up, right? And ice skating the same way, where I got them out they've got an outdoor skating rink, and we're outside, and we're, it's beautiful, it's cold, it's crisp, but we're ice skating, which for me was incredible. And I'll never forget, I think it was 2 springs ago, I took the covers off the furniture, and I had like this childlike thought. I'm like, oh, this would make a great slip and slide. And I'm like, why not? Why not? So like, I hose this thing out, I take my shirt off, and I'm teaching the kids how to do a slip and slide, right? Is that I think sometimes that we get into these routines, and if we'll just pull something back, like, what was that thing? Like, my son's on my back, and my daughter's on my back when we're doing this, and they're just laughing, like giddy laughing, just from the belly, just, and like in the next story from next week, like the stories will be about this, like those things, right?
Yes.
Is that if we could put ourselves in the state, in the condition, like, what was the thing that made you laugh the hardest as a kid, right? What made you laugh the hardest as a child? Go do that. Like, one of our children.
What you did, which is so cool, more than they'll even remember necessarily the specific, is that you showed up as a parent.
Oh yeah.
I would say at the end of my life, I hope that my kids would say, "Dad showed up." And what you did right then is you showed up, whether it's the sled or whatever it would be, but you showed up, and they laughed about that, but they laughed with you. That's such a cool thing. I mean, showing up and being in, all the other stuff of, grades and this and that, and all that stuff is important, but just showing up and saying to the kids, "I love being with you guys.
Yeah.
I love it." And they know it. Boy, that's so cool. Good for you.
Yeah,
it's really good.
That's one of my intentions, right? Is that
Yeah.
Like, they won't like your behavior, right, is so critical parenting. It's not like you can mess up. Like, the kids ask you that tough question, right? The birds and the bees stuff and all that kind of junk and jazz.
Right.
I know it's gonna come someday, right? Or that first breakup, I've got to help them navigate through that first person they were dating, that they were awesome before and they'll be awesome later, and navigate through that. There's going to be some tough stuff, right?
Oh, sure.
Right? But I say this to my wife all the time, and she agrees with me and models this, is that if you want to have a great relationship with your kids when they're teenagers, it's got to show up when they're 6, right? Because if you didn't care about them when they're 6, you're not going to show up and like, hey, I'm going to show up when you're 14. So I'm a big believer in, like, like dividends, right, is in you invest in things, and people are one
Yeah.
of the best things to invest in. And so I look at it very simply is that, number one, I happen to like sledding. I think it's a blast, but
Yeah. Well, that's nice too.
so
Yeah,
that
for
helps quite
sure.
a bit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
addition to that, I'm going, you know what? Like when I want them to, when they're 13 and 14 and 15 years old and they're going through those really challenging times that we all go and their hormones are all over the place and what have you, I want them to know confidently that I was always here. And so if they need to talk to me, there's no question whether I'm going to be here and I'm going to listen, right? And I may not have the answer, right? Because I often won't. Because man, did I jack it up when I was a teenager. Not like I got through that real well. I don't have any real expertise on how to navigate that
Yeah.
period of life.
Smoothly.
Yeah, my gosh, I was a woo. Yeah, so
Yeah. Well, like my kids, I'm a musician too, and I like and both my girls, I mean, my one daughter has been on Broadway.
mm,
She covered and did the Carole King role in Beautiful
oh,
quite a
how
bit.
incredible.
And the other one teaches theater in Toledo. And it was like, but when I worked with them, I mean, we had to share that, and they would sing and I would play the piano. And I was straight with them. I was like, if they were out of pitch or stuff, I wasn't, oh, you guys are just so perfect. I was like, no, come on, get it in whatever it would be,
Yeah,
but that fun thing of just doing that, and it helped form their whole thing of what they do now as making their own living and living their life. And it's like, and to watch that, to sit there on in a Broadway theater and watch your daughter do the Carole King role on Beautiful and say, I was part of that a little bit, just being with her. And now I talk about dividends, just sitting there going, wow. And then seeing my other daughter teaching kids in the school for the arts, and oh yeah, but showing up, boy, there it is. Good. That's the legacy. You talk about purposeful legacy, that uh, dad showed up, dad was there.
yeah. There's a lot of them I have. Like and I don't know if they're the right ones, right? But they are where I am at this journey. Like, it's interesting. I look at my life in decades and look at certain milestones and moments and where I'm at today. And one element I know is that there's two things only a couple things I hold to be true in my life. One, there is a God, and I'm not him. Um, right? So I know that to be true. I know that to be true. I know often, and I know also that there's very, very little absolute truths. There's only what's absolutely true for me at this moment, and that needs to serve me right now. That the ability to stay open minded and learn is what served me so well. And so I have some intentionalities today with my three kids and the things I want them to be my legacy and for them and the way I operate, the way I show up. Choices I make, I think I shared with you, I'm an ultra marathon runner, and they've seen me suffer, right? My profession has allowed me to be at a place and that the suffering time was when they weren't before they were born. Like getting my business up and running was before they were born. They don't get to see that, right? You don't get to see the really long hours and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and dad with driving a beat up car, and they don't see all that, right? That they see me today, right?
yeah.
And I think there's an importance to suffering, to grit, to tenacity. I think it's one of those things. And to believe that there's a value in it, I think people need to see it and experience it firsthand. And so my kids watched me run 50 miles in a day. And they were there the whole day, daddy running, for 12 hours straight. And we're there at the finish line and saw their dad really stinky, like really stinky
Yeah.
and pretty beat up and pretty excited. And I'm not saying people need to go out and run 50 miles to
Right.
teach their kids. Like, I'm not suggesting that's appropriate for everyone, but I am suggesting very strongly that when we live with an intentionality, what are the lessons you want to teach your kids, right? Like one of them is I think a life without play is very rarely a life worth living. That if play is not part of your day, part of your life, like we're meant to have fun, we're meant to laugh, we're meant to experience joy. However you experience joy, and laughter is often connected to that. That if you aren't laughing, like my gosh, like what are you doing? You
One of the
know?
things I taught my kids was don't group think.
Mm,
Don't group think. If a person who, for example, is black does something bad to you, don't go into, well, that's blacks for you. Don't go there. If a person, a woman, you know what I mean? Just because a person of a certain ethnicity or a color or whatever did something that you find not good, don't jump into the whole group. Okay, that person did something that wasn't good. Don't go to groups. Don't go there. You know, and I'm really I think that really took with my kids. They can see unfairness when it's happening, and that's important to me. It's try to be a kind person, be kind, approach people with kindness, approach people, that was, what helped me was my music background. I mean, for me, being around different people of different colors, and being open. My parents never could understand me. When I married my wife now, which is, I've got a divorce from the mother of the kids, and we stayed friends, but then I remarried, and the woman I remarried is an African American and very light skinned. So a lot of people don't even know she's African American, but she is, and proud of it. But when my father found out, he couldn't deal with it at all. I knew he and I never talked about race hardly at all, because he was a racist and I'm not. And so we just wouldn't talk about it. But when this happened, it just went south. And my kids, had to see me standing up and saying, I mean, I was not 20. I was 50. By that time, I was like 50 years old, so it was like, but you have to show, and I think they have to see you standing up for something, that you're willing to stand up for something you believe in. You have to see that.
Couldn't agree more. So those are some key takeaways to understand, like, what makes you a zombie, right? What makes you alive, right? And I think when we think about people living intentionality, people living on purpose, people who are making those impacts in life, in their community, on their family, in their church, in their synagogue, in their mosque, wherever they're a person of impact, right? Regardless of anything that their creator or however they were created, whatever their beliefs suggest, is that there's commonality, right? And one of those commonalities, one of those real big commonalities, is that they're actually alive. They're engaged in life. They aren't just going, they're not in the rut. They're not in this grave. No. And they're saying...
Well, you're a perfect example of it. I mean, you look at, you're doing the running and all that, but you're doing this. You don't have to be putting on a pod. You don't have to.
No, I don't.
No, and you're doing it. And it's not like to just bolster your ego. You're trying to make a difference. You're out there. You're doing some stuff. You keep, and that's powerful stuff.
I believe fundamentally that the human condition will stay in the human condition wherever it is, right? Until, like, we are Newton's law. A body in motion will stand to stay in motion. A body at rest will stand to stay at rest until equal and opposite forces act upon it, right? So, very basic. Well, I believe that our brain, right, our neural processes, I've read and studied on this, is that we build these neural pathways that become so ingrained that until we create an equal and opposite force upon it, and one of those forces is seeing a different path that is possible, right? And so my simplicity, my simple element is that I know the life I live and how I show up for my family. While not perfect, I'm not the perfect dad. I definitely have times where I lose patience with my children and could show up with more grace and kindness. I definitely lose patience with my wife, and I'm growing in those spaces as well, right? But you can put money on, you put the whole bank on that I am showing up with a lot more intentionality, right, than I would have been if I was a father when I was in 20s, in my 30s. And when I'm 50, it's going to get better. Like, how I am as a father will be better because of the intentionality I show up each day, that I'm not just going through the motions, right? And so much of that was inspired by watching other people and being in relationship with people who are living that way. And I went, here's super simple, is that if we can inspire people to recognize two truths: who you are matters more than what you have. By miles, right? This society has this observation, this obsession with stuff, right? Stuff, right? And I've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. No. Never seen it. You're not taking it with you, right? But the only legacy that will truly matter is how you showed up in people's lives, the relationships you built, and that you can be intentional with the one you have with yourself and the one you have with others. You want to make a real lasting legacy? Be intentional with how you show up in people's lives. Yeah. Every person I've spoken to, let's talk about this for a minute. Holy bananas, right? You could have set up a counseling and psychology practice, right? Worked with, marriage counseling, right? And I specialize in ultra high net worth marriage counseling, charge an obscene amount of money, right? That you're going to fix people's marriages and Merry Christmas, and you could have, and I don't know what your financial situation is. I'm not suggesting that you aren't doing well, but I'm saying you could have made bank. People do that, right? you see people doing this, in the name of religion, right? Like, I've got all the answers. Just follow
Yeah,
me, right?
yeah,
Just send me a check for $10,000 and your life's going to be a whole lot better. And the reality is that when you get in the trenches with somebody like what you've done and people like what you've done, but more importantly, when you live the intentional life that you have, the real gift is for yourself,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I agree totally. I used to always kid about I was trying to figure out I wanted to do by the time I grew up, because I mean I went from a bachelor degree in music, and then I got a master's degree in mass communication, and then a master's in PhD in counseling. I mean, it was like, but when it finally started to flip into the counseling, I was as I looked at my life and I thought, where am I going? What am I doing? I didn't have the kids yet or anything, but I thought people trust me. I like talking to people. There was something in that sort of rang a bell with me that's where I needed to be, sort of in that whole line of what you just said, more in the vein of somehow being a helper, and not a saver, not all that, but just somehow being involved in the process. And then it was that, yeah. And after I got my PhD, I thought, I don't want to work in an office all day doing this. I wanted to be in the trenches. I wanted to be with people. I wanted to. And the one I talk about, and I always teach counseling students this, that counselors are supposed to be, don't get involved emotionally, stay detached. When I talk about a young woman who was driving in a car and was in an accident, and her 4-year-old child was killed in it, and I went to see her in the hospital, and we talked, and her husband had come up from Southern Ohio and was staying in the hospital room with her. And I said, you understand now, this, as bad as this is going to get worse. You're going to go home and you're going to see her clothes in the closet. You're going to have all these holidays, her birthday, her death day. I said, in about 2 years from now, when you think you're starting to maybe get it together, somebody's going to call up who doesn't know any of this happened and say, how's the baby doing? And I said, you better be there for each other. I was looking at her husband too. It was like, this is what this is all about. It's being there. And I went back to see her the next morning. She was getting ready to leave, and she was thanking me for talking with her and all that. And she said, it's still hard. She said, I saw a little boy coming in the hospital carrying some flowers. And she said, I just wondered who was going to help me pick my strawberries this year. And I tell these counseling students, I said, she was crying, her husband was crying, and I was crying because it was sad. It wasn't hopeless in the sense of that she couldn't go on and do it, but it was sad. And you have to embrace that sadness sometimes, is that's part of life. You can get through it. That's part of not being a zombie. If you're a zombie, you don't feel sad. You don't feel anything.
Mm.
You don't feel anything. But as soon as you start feeling pain, you're not a zombie. At least, I mean, I go with you, joy and happiness. I would rather go there. But if it starts with pain, then it starts with pain,
Fine.
and at least I'm feeling something. And
Yes.
then I got to get into the power, but I don't have to stay in pain. I can do something about that. It builds on it. It builds on it, and
Well,
I've tried to do that with my music. I've done so much stuff now with music, and that's the power of hope and keeping hope alive, and that things don't have to stay the same, whatever it would be.
yeah, one of your CDs was on repeat at my house way longer than it should have been. Not because it's not a great CD. I think I showed you. Yeah, you sent Colored Sky, right? So is I have that right?
Colored Sky.
Yeah, Colored Sky. So yeah, you sent that to my residence a number of years ago, and my son like fell in love with your music at
Oh,
4 or
that's so
5 years
cool.
old, and did like literally like which like one of the songs is about a breakup, which I thought was really humorous. This
Yeah.
like 5-year-old boy,
Or 5-year-old kids
you
getting
know,
into the
it was outstanding. But one of the things I think is so like that's people say to me like why do you run so far? I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And you're number one, you're right. You can't because you don't want to. But one of the greatest gifts of running beyond, it's the pain. It is the pain. Pain is an incredible teacher, and we try to avoid it. But it's there to give us information. It's there to teach us about life, and it helps you feel alive. Like one of my clients just lost her husband a week ago now, and the thing she was most joyful, she'd worked in a hospital setting. She had a really healthy relationship with death, is she was so grateful she got to lay in bed with him as he took his final breath and be there beside him, which during COVID, she was able to navigate that and get that done and get him home because she knew what was coming. And the most important thing for her is for him not to die alone, right? And like I think, and she talked about his death with a with this healthy balance between sorrow and actual joy, um, because of how she was able to show up for him in that moment. And I think one of the things that we so often forget, right, is the joy that comes to somebody, to you, when you just show up for somebody
Yeah.
else, no matter what the situation is. You say, "Oh, this is going to
even
be."
even when you can't do anything really in the sense of like fixing it or making it better per se, but you're just there and they know you're there.
Yeah,
And I mean, like when that woman said to me when I said I'm still here, and she said, well, yeah, you're my friend. I mean, it's like, yeah, that was enough, just being there. Yeah, you're right, you're absolutely right.
so when you think about your legacy, Scott, is that for you? Is that, of all the things you've done, the books, the talks, right? All the speeches, all the everything you've done, the musical work. I mean, my gosh, it is a it's a volume of work in your lifetime. What's the most important legacy you leave behind for others? If they could say one thing about you and one thing alone, what would that be?
He cared. I think he cared and he showed up. I care. I mean, I care. I care about the world. I care about people. I care about possibilities. That for me is that I tried to live that I cared and that I did show up. I did, and that people know. I don't know. I can go on and on, but it's like it's a hard question to answer to just sort of sum it down to that. But for me, it would be, uh, you know, I care. I think if somebody, when people come up and they respond to just that, just somebody looks me up 27 years and can remember that I helped them get sober. It wasn't about my ego. It was that somehow that I cared about this person. He sensed that I cared about him when he was going through treatment. That he would, he didn't know me outside of that. And a woman who I talked to had a choice to make between going to a hospital for cancer treatment or this or that. And I said, well, I can't tell you what to do. And we just looked at it and looked at it. And about 8, 9 months later, or maybe even a year, I was doing a talk at another place, some church or something for some kids. And this woman walks in the back of the church, and I think, I know her, but I can't think of who is this person. And she just was smiling at me. And she sat in the pew, wait till I was done, and everybody was walking by. And I started to guess, this was, how you probably had that
Oh
happen where
yeah,
you,
oh
you
yeah.
think, oh God, who is it? And then I said, oh my God, it's you. She said, oh, I just wanted to tell you I wanted to thank you for talking to me. That was a year earlier, and she said that she had gone into remission, and she had done this other gone to Cleveland, I think, for the treatment. But she just said, "I just wanted to thank you." I mean, she looked me up, and to me, again, this is not a look at how wonderful I am. It was that the act of caring resonates with people,
It's
and she could,
transformational, isn't it?
yeah. And that, I didn't have to do that. I mean, when somebody does something for you and they didn't have to do it for you, there's no money involved. They could have easily walked away and nobody would have thought any worse of them. And yet they did it. It could have been just a word, a gesture. I do that all the time, just saying something that's just a little supportive statement, acknowledging somebody's, say, wow, you gave that a good shot. And I noticed that over there. And that was really, whatever it would be. I think that's important. I don't know. So I
When
guess that would be mine.
I'm
Just
I'm I'm always blown away, and I'm most blown away when somebody does it, and they're at a place in their life. There is no alternative motive. They're not going to gain anything from it. There's not like there's it's just purely showing up and genuinely caring is is just so moving to me when people do that.
me too. I called a professor back years. I thought he had died. I had, and this guy changed my life. He changed my life. He taught. I was majoring in music, and then at one point I left, and so for a semester I couldn't be back in music, and I come back, and I took courses I probably never would have taken, and one of them was an anthropology kind of a thing, and this guy opened my way of thinking and stuff, and I tracked him down years later. He was retired, and he did remember me because we went on digs and around Ohio and found, and I said, I almost gave him a heart attack that I called him back, just to tell him that I remembered him and that he really had helped change my life because of the way he taught and the way he thought. And I needed to hear that. And it was like, and I always just appreciated him that, he did more than just teach a textbook course. He really impacted me as a human being, and I wanted
Mm,
to thank him for it. And yeah, that goes right to what you said. You know, you that when that happens, magic happens, transformation happens. You know, and I always get a laugh in my talk when I say, "Do you ever have that happen where somebody calls you and you talk and you come back out to your wife or husband and say, well, that was so and so. He just called because he was thinking about me. He didn't want money or anything. He just was thinking about me. You know, and you think, wow, that's pretty nice. If somebody was just sort of thinking about me, they just
yeah,
wanted to say hi.
it's a
It does blow people's mind.
yeah, yeah. There's a song, and I don't believe he originally wrote it. Maybe he did, but the old lead singer to Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder, wrote a
Mhm.
song, right? And and it's one of my favorite songs. But one of the lines in the song is, "I'm a lucky man. I can count on two hands the people that I love." Right? Is that, if the woman who's dying of cancer, the woman who, each person you speak about, like there are some transformational powers in this world, right?
Yeah.
In the expression, which love to me, empathy, all those things. I define empathy as love in motion, right? It's the action of
That's
expressing
nice.
love,
I like that. I like
right?
that. Yeah.
And care is another way. Caring often involves empathy or sympathy. Those are commonalities in the act of showing care, right? Is that love and forgiveness are two so transformational elements. And then you talk about, and I think it's so important, is this choice of recognizing that we always have a choice. So,
Yeah.
well, Dr. Sheperd, Scott, I can't thank you enough for your
It's been
time.
so good. I thank you, Kev. This is great. This has been great.
I
Made
want
my day. Made my
to.
day.
Well, that's so kind of you. I want to. How can we support you? I know who's in charge attacking the stress myth from the workplace to the home front. Really relevant book right now that you wrote during this whole pandemic time. So I wanted to make sure people know about that. I know you
Well,
have other
I have
works.
a, well, I have a little ebook that's I really like, and it talks about Franco and James Stockdale,
Mm,
who
the Stockdale
it,
Principle.
yeah, it's if the people, my website is rekindleyourheart.com.
Rekindleyourheart.com.
Yeah, but
Okay.
yeah, but that book talks about it's called what is it called? I can't remember. Something if you can't handle the small stuff, the big stuff will bury you or something. But it's anyways, yeah. I just
We'll link to Rekindle Your Heart in the show notes.
yeah.
How else can we support you? How else can we follow you? Are you on social media at all? I know you
Oh
said you're
yeah,
so.
I'm on Facebook all
Okay.
the time,
Okay.
and I'm doing a lot more music. I'm going to start making another CD with a really good singer friend of mine, and I got a bunch of tunes. I did that one thing that was done in Kampala, Uganda, called the. I did two versions of the Power of Hope. And if you go on YouTube and you put Scott, in the search box,
Yes.
for
Yep.
the thing,
Yep.
put mine is Scott Sheperd, Sheperd, as one word. Uh, you'll see a whole bunch of videos that I put together of my music, and then there's one of them. There's a bunch of Power of the Hope, the jazz version, and there's one that's the Uganda version. That was
Mm.
so cool. That was so cool. I had this French woman. I met her on LinkedIn, and we sent the music. We got to be good friends, and she choreographed it, and it's cool. It's very cool. And then we did one locally here with the more jazz stuff in it than classical. But so yeah,
It's incredible. Well, Scott, one last question for you. How would you define and what does legacy on purpose mean to you?
yeah. I saw that question, and I was thinking. I guess it's sort of what you just said, though. It's the that you actually are thinking about it. I mean, you obviously we can leave legacies that maybe we don't even think about, that somebody remembers us in ways that we don't even think about it ourselves, but that you're actually thinking this is important. I want to, and it's not so much for my legacy in the sense of an ego trip, but that this is an important value for me, and I guess for me it goes back to my kids maybe more than anything, but about teaching them to be kind and compassionate and open and loving and be curious, be willing, don't take stupid risks like can I beat the train to the crossing kind of risk, but don't be afraid to take some risks. Don't be afraid to stretch yourself out a little bit. Believe in yourself that you can fail and get back up and keep going. And And just that they saw me out there doing it. I mean, when I just tell you one quick thing. When I was doing that job, and then they closed the whole substance abuse thing at the hospital, and I was losing my job, and my wife at the time was working as a principal, but we weren't making a ton of money, and I got two little kids, and I don't have a job now. And then I had to choose between, do I try to make a living as a public speaker, or do I try to go back and find a job? And I finally said, I'm going to go for it as a speaker and make a living as a speaker. And I did it for 30 years, plus just doing it. But they saw that. It's sort of what you were saying about, they see it. When they see you doing something, that also resonates, in there. So, but I guess it comes up. I just wanted to show up. I love being with my kids. I loved both my girls, besides being artists and they're singers and all that, they were great jocks too. They both played basketball. They were like, my kids were like a piece of cake to raise. They were just great kids. And I wanted to be there at the basketball games. And when I married my wife that I have now, she has her own kids too. They're incredible kids. But we would go to these games, and she was like not used. She had started on a ballet school in Chicago, my wife, and I mean, so she's been in the arts too, but sports she wasn't so much into. So there we were sitting there watching girls basketball, and I would go early. She's like, "What are we doing here?" So it's sort of like we're showing up.
You're showing up. You're showing up is what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're not late to you're never late to the things you care about.
Yeah.
You're never late to the things you care about.
Oh, I'll tell you one quick one. No, well, but I'll tell you one quick one. My daughter, the one now who's been on Broadway, was a really good basketball player, but she was about 4 years younger than my oldest. And so she was not still in high school yet. And they had a halftime thing where the kids in grade school were shooting. And I had been doing a talk out of town. I was driving back to try, because I knew she was going to do it, but I didn't. I came in just when it had ended. But she won. She won the thing. And but she knew I showed up. But she was laughing. She said, "I'm sort of glad you were a little bit late. I might have been more nervous and probably wouldn't have won." So being a little bit late that time actually sort of helped out a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Oh, this has been so great. Oh,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We'll have to, stay in contact. This has been a gift to me.
Oh, yeah, please do that. Yeah, I love what you're doing. You're doing great things, really. I think this is, and I know this goes way beyond business. I mean, this is something that's obviously in your heart, and it's like I said about being around people like you. It just motivates me and stimulates me, and it's been a pleasure. And Kara is the same way. I just met her a little bit, and she seems like you got some good people with you too.
I'm very blessed. Thank you for those kind words.
Okay.
We'll see you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, so I'm still here. I just wanted to create a natural